Ethiopia's parliament approved legislation on Tuesday to permit foreign banks to operate, marking a major step in the country's economic reforms under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed since 2018. The law allows foreign banks to establish subsidiaries, open branches, and acquire up to about 40% stake in local banks. This move aims to attract in overseas investment into Ethiopia, one of Africa's largest economies with a population exceeding 120 million. Joining me to talk about this is Professor Iraki, an economist, University of Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, Professor Iraki, for joining us.
Thank you and good morning or good afternoon in Kenya.
Of course. Now, foreign banks had not operated in Ethiopia before now. Any tangible reason why they were initially prohibited?
I think when I look at the Ethiopian economy, the Ethiopian political system, they have been very particular about protecting their markets. So it's not just banks, but a lot of other foreign investors have been finding it very hard to get into Ethiopian markets. So that protectionism seems to be getting weeded down so that Ethiopia is now becoming more open to foreign investors.
Hmm. So now, what are then the probably potential benefits or maybe drawbacks of allowing foreign banks to operate within Ethiopia's financial space?
I think that's very good news for that country because for a country to develop, you need foreign investors, you need foreign money, you need foreign capital. If you look at the growth of a country like China, to a large extent, China grew because of a lot of foreign investment. So Ethiopia is doing the same. I remember that one of the Kenyan leading telecommunication companies, Safaricom, is already there. So by bringing foreign investment, by bringing foreign capital, you make the country grow faster and raise the standard of living of the citizens. So that's very good news.
Okay, so Professor Iraki, earlier on you talked about the need for the protection of the country's financial industry, and now you're saying it is good. Some people say that it might heighten unhealthy competition for the financial sector, largely dominated by state-owned Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. Don't you think so?
If you look at the new regulations that are coming up, they are capping the ownership by foreign investors to 40%. I think that's one way the Ethiopian government is trying to make sure that that the local banks, or the local financial institutions, are protected from competition. So there's no question that the coming banks, the foreign banks coming to Ethiopia, have more money, have more power, have more experience, and they're likely to do better than the local banks. And that is why they have that cap. But in the long run, I think the combination of local banks and foreign banks is good for the economy.
Yeah, so then what should be the role of the Ethiopian government in ensuring that the local banks are able to compete favorably, at least with their foreign counterparts? We're even looking at support systems or mechanisms that might be put in place to offer a bit of protection for the domestic lenders.
I think apart from making sure that foreign banks can own 40%, they can use the approach that was used by the Nigerian government and the Kenyan government by raising the capital requirement by banks. For now, as we talk, there's a law that is demanding Kenyan banks to raise their core capital, and I think Nigerian banks did that. So if banks can have more core capital, if they are small, they can combine, they can merge, then they can compete with foreign banks.
Hmm. And we also see that, the Ethiopian government capped foreign ownership of local banks at 40%. Would it fill the ability of foreign investors to exert control over the banking sector later on?
I think any bank that is that restricted might feel the pain. But what I suspect is that the Ethiopian government, as their banks become more competitive, they become tuned to the foreign competition. I think they'll probably raise it up from maybe 40 to 50, 60, and they keep on raising so that they don't destabilize the local banking sector. But for now, I think if I'm investing there, 40% is too retro, but it can always be adjusted in future.
Okay, so then with the entry of these foreign banks now into Ethiopia's financial industry, are you expecting to now see growth in terms of financial inclusion drive of the government? And maybe it will open the vista for other foreign banks from other countries to also step into that financial space?
I think it will much to a large extent depend on how the newcomers, the first banks that are going to get there, are going to perform. If they perform very well, then other banks will be attracted to come and join the market, try and come and make a bit of money. But one of the big questions that we probably should be looking at is to what extent would the citizens of Ethiopia benefit from this investment by foreign banks? will there be more will there be more inclusion in terms of people who are banking? Because foreign banks tend to go to the big cities and they neglect the rural areas, the small towns. And I hope that the Ethiopian government has incentives for these foreign banks to go to the rural areas that are the banks, so that there's more financial inclusion, so that the rising tide raises all boats.
Okay, okay. So, Professor Iraki, even as we are seeing, several monetary reforms springing from the country's government and the apex body, how would you assess the role of the IMF in the terms of the role it is playing in seeing that these measures attract foreign investments and probably increase its financial portfolio?
IMF usually comes to a country because it is invited. Most of the time, they don't bring themselves. So I think IMF has probably played a big role in making sure that there are financial reforms, there are market reforms, there's more competition, and I'm sure there will be some opposition to IMF reforms, because if you look at countries where IMF has come, people have always complained about the gap between the rich and the poor expanding, the people who are not able to compete being neglected. So I'm hoping that the IMF instituted reforms are going to make sure that no Ethiopian is left behind in terms of economic growth. Because any good economic growth should be encompassing, should be inclusive, should not leave some people behind. And I hope that the reforms instituted by IMF are like that, because if they don't do that, there will be political backlash, as we have seen in a number of countries, including Kenya.
Hmm. Now, talking about economic growth, do you think the country's decision to float its currency will impact or probably re-engineer a positive economic era for the country?
I can share from my experience in Kenya. I remember there was a time when the Kenyan shilling was controlled, was not floated. There was no free exchange. But once the currency was floated, once the currency became free, I think there was a lot of foreign exchange. And when people come to invest, they found it easy to repatriate profit. They found it easy to bring the money. They found it easy to trade the currencies. So I think in the long run, having a floating currency is good for the economy, is good for the investors. And I've seen that happen in my own country, and I'm sure it will happen in Ethiopia too.
And you think the floating of ECO by Africa, that conversation is ongoing now. You think it will benefit the Horn of Africa nations that Kenya and Ethiopia also are part of?
That's the question again, please.
Yes, I said the floating of ECO, that's one African currency that a lot of stories have gone on now about in Africa. Do you think that would also help improve the Horn of African nations in terms of the economy? We're looking at Kenya, Ethiopia, and all other countries within that region.
That is wrong overdue. I look forward to the day we are going to have one currency in East Africa or the whole of Africa, so that when I'm going to Uganda, when I'm going to Ethiopia, I don't keep on changing the currency. It's very expensive, not just for the consumers, not just for the tourists, but also for investors to keep on changing currency. I've been to the European Union and I know how easy it is to trade, to move from one country to another because of a single currency. Whatever the name you call it, whether you call it equal or the sharing, whatever it is, a single African currency is wrong overdue.
All right, Professor X. Iraki, economist, University of Nairobi, Kenya. It was nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you and have a good afternoon.
And you too.